Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and yeah, it's been a while, but we're going to be playing Three Kingdoms. I want to talk about it today because I've been slowly coming back to it every now and then. I think that the recent issues with Total War in general have been making me revisit other titles to play. Now, Three Kingdoms was actually one of my favorite Total War games. I know it sounds a bit weird, but the diplomacy system for one is absolutely amazing, and it adds so much depth to a Total War game. Obviously, I haven't really played this game much in the past 2 years or so, mostly because Creative Assembly decided to kill the game off, and in the most interesting way possible, you know? A really happy, smiley video saying that they've done everything that they could and that there's going to be a sequel. I mean, okay. Naturally, the community was pissed off because you don't just kill support of a game, especially since there was promised DLC that hasn't been released yet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, after some time, I feel like I can go back to it. Obviously, there are some really cool mods to this game which make it still feel fairly fresh. It has a lot of support from the community. And it's because of the continued support by the community that this game still has decent player numbers, still peaking at around 8,000 or so per day. And that sounds amazing considering that obviously this game is dead, right? As far as we're concerned, there is not going to be any more official support. Hell, it's beaten Pharaoh by a very large margin, actually. And even games like Medieval 2 and Rome 2 aren't even getting close, which is pretty interesting considering that those are more favored among the community. Now, you might be wondering why I'm talking about Three Kingdoms now. Well, simply put, I honestly think that Creative Assembly should revive support for this title. Before you start taking out the pitchforks, listen to me. So a lot of people would be saying, well, what's the point? There's going to be a Three Kingdoms 2. I honestly don't think that's going to be the case. There have been some rumors suggesting that yeah, it's not going to happen. And to be honest, I thought it was never going to happen since the very beginning. You go back to videos 2 years ago, I always said, yeah, that's probably a way for the Creative Assembly staff to just pacify everyone, and that Three Kingdoms 2 was just never going to happen. There is actually no way that they can make a second game, which is going to be identical essentially, and expect people to pay full price and basically buy everything all over again. Yes, I know some people are going to say, well, what about Total War Warhammer? Warhammer's different. Warhammer was always meant to be a trilogy. Three Kingdoms was not. Creative Assembly seemed to be going with this idea of making multiple games that are linked up together, hence Pharaoh and Troy, but that doesn't work, especially for something like Three Kingdoms. It's very stylized because it's centered around one country. Same thing as Shogun. We had a Shogun 2 eventually, but how long ago was Shogun 1 to Shogun 2? The idea is, yes, after a certain amount of time, a sequel can come in with new stylized stuff, new quality of life improvements, just a whole new game in general, but I wouldn't accept a Total War Three Kingdoms 2 between now and 10 years time, essentially. So we need to talk about why Three Kingdoms failed. Three Kingdoms failed because of its DLC strategy. I know that sounds very odd considering that we're very used to DLC, but it's not because of a lot of DLC. In fact, there wasn't really enough and we were expecting more, but rather the fact that it was inconsistent. When it comes to the Three Kingdoms period, there's a set storyline, and people expected that the DLC was going to follow that storyline. The first DLC was unfortunately the downfall for Three Kingdoms. I'm not talking about the pre-order Yellow Turban thing. Even then, that shouldn't have been a thing considering that we needed 2 DLCs for the Yellow Turbans, but it's more the case of the first post-pre-order incentive. This was 8 Princes, the literal end to the story of the Three Kingdoms. I don't know whose smart idea it was to just come up with that, but that was just bizarre. You shouldn't start off with the end of a story on a story-focused game. Three Kingdoms, while still being a sandbox title, does have a narrative. You can follow that with the characters if you decide to play as them, or you can go full sandbox, but the narrative is still important when it comes to DLC, and just starting off with the end of the story seems extremely redundant. Actually, no, not even redundant, just plain old stupid. It's something that nobody does. You don't start with the end of the story. Then the DLC started kind of following the story a little bit, Mandate of Heaven, then introducing the next Yellow Turbans to have a little bit more of a story focus. After that, it was A World Betrayed, which focused on, you know, Lubu and so on. To be honest, we should have had like a really big Dongzhuo pack prior to that, following the story of the whole coalition against Dongzhuo, then going to A World Betrayed. Then we randomly got in the Furious Wild, which introduced the Nanman. This is when I started really getting into Three Kingdoms, as they started introducing new factions with unique playstyles. Again, still not in this point of the story though. This is way later, like Shu Han has already begun forming at this point, I believe. And then going back into the timeline for Fates Divided, which introduced the whole concept of Yuan Shao versus Cao Cao. This is the whole Guandu battle. And between that, we had a bunch of characters being introduced. Well, just 3, but they were unique at least, and they had a little bit of variety. It would allow you to have a few different playstyles. And the fact of the matter is, it's just the case of, you know, if you're going to buy DLC, they need to release FLC too. Obviously, the big kicker is we knew that another DLC was in production, and there was likely a few more. We had the Northern Lords essentially confirmed. This was supposed to be, if memory serves, Gonzunzang fighting against the Northern Lords of Wuhan. So people were expecting a cavalry-focused DLC with a bunch of new mechanics. This could have been a bit more to propel the importance of Zhao Yun as he eventually leaves Gonzunzang to join up with Liu Bei. The problem is this DLC was confirmed when Creative Assembly used to do their what the teams are working on, and yeah, nothing. It's likely that the DLC was almost done, if not done. How Creative Assembly works is that they usually work a few DLCs in advance. It's a massive shame that this wasn't actually implemented because a lot of people were expecting it, plus a lot of people were getting hyped up for an eventual expansion or DLC in Korea, as that area had slowly been fleshed out in the map without too many people noticing. But again, we didn't get that. They killed off the game. They did one last patch which, let's be honest here, wasn't good. There's a lot of issues. In fact, if you want to play Three Kingdoms in the most optimal way possible, you need to download the community bug fix mod that's still getting updates even to this day. The last one is on the 6th of November. However, with this game, still very passionate fan base, and the fact that it's still one of their more popular titles, they could redeem themselves. A lot of us are waiting for Creative Assembly to go into some sort of redemption arc due to, well, you can't even say it's Shadow of Change. It's literally just the past few years have been abysmal when it comes to Total War. If they're going to fix up the problems with Warhammer 3, they might as well fix up Three Kingdoms and finally finish off what was pending. Again, we're not going to get a Total War Three Kingdoms 2. If it ever happens, I'll eat my hat, but I very much doubt it. Not because of the recent Sega issues with the firings and so on, obviously linked up to hyenas, but rather I just thought it was never going to happen regardless, because again, Creative Assembly like to tell people things, but it's not actually happening. Now, before people start complaining, this has actually been done before. An abandoned title essentially has been revived and then given the love and attention it needed. This happened with Rome 2. It was an atrocious launch, and then CA Sophia came in a few years later and fixed everything up. It's something that could happen again with Three Kingdoms. It's one of these things where I know a lot of people are thinking about how is this going to take away from Warhammer 3 more than anything. It shouldn't. You know, Creative Assembly have multiple teams. They keep stressing that. I find it very hard to believe at this point. But if it is true that they do have multiple teams, maybe it's about time they start giving people what exactly they wanted. Once again, it's very odd that Creative Assembly games, if you look at Total War titles, they start off really strong and then they just die that quickly. We'll be talking about this in the future, but it's definitely something that really does annoy me. So how about a bunch of new support for Total War Three Kingdoms, you know? A big patch to fix up all the glaring issues, including the overheating CPUs. How about we actually get the content that we were expecting for this game? Like, for example, again, the Northern Lords, a DLC which is likely either done or close to completion, or, you know, a proper Three Kingdom start for the game known as Three Kingdoms. It's kind of odd that we are playing a game called Total War Three Kingdoms based on the whole Three Kingdoms saga, and yet, you know, we don't have the big start where Wu has been formed up. This is in the south. We've got Shu Han in the west, and obviously Cao Cao in the north after defeating Yuan Shu and just solidifying his position there. Yes, it would be 3 major factions. There would be some smaller ones with Ma Chao at that point still up and running. Probably still the troops in Hanzhong. But the main thing people wanted was playing the big part of the story. This was a period where alliances would form and dissolve really quickly. You know, there was the whole betrayal of Guan Yu and just so many things that happened during this point. A few other start dates would have been wonderful too, just to give you more variety for different types of playstyle and just different campaigns. This game had so much promise, and it feels like it was unfairly abandoned purely because they didn't sell that much DLC. And I get it, right? Profitability has to come first. However, if you provide the wrong types of DLC, of course, it's not going to frigging sell. The game so far wasn't really representative of what happened properly over there with all the different types of factions. You can see this on screen right now with a time-lapse that I found online going throughout the years of the period of the Three Kingdoms leading up to the full unification of the Jin dynasty. Obviously, I'm not saying that we should get all these start years because, well, that would be absolutely insane. And, well, really, when they're just years apart, it doesn't really matter. Every few years or so for the key points, yes. But you can notice here that there's a lot of factions. There's a lot of possible characters. And not only that, but there's a lot of actual fleshing out of the actual country. People want a lot of variety because it's what makes Total War games so popular. Sure, yes, we do have character mods like make them unique and so on, but some of them might not work with others. A lot of them are getting outdated. Every now and then, when a launcher update happens, it does kill those mods too, which is absolutely frustrating because it really shouldn't change anything for the game. But yeah, Creative Assembly can't go out and say that they didn't have any possible work to do because there's just literally so much that they could use here. Hell, like even the Korean stuff is mapped out. We know that through history, so we could easily have that done. It's something that needs to be thought about, and it's something that could be pretty good here. Reviving the Three Kingdoms game and just bringing it back to what it should be and just get to the point of getting as close to finishing it as possible rather than leaving it pretty much in a halfway point. It's something that is extremely frustrating and obviously does not work for Total War games. We need to stop having this happen. It's likely going to happen again to Total War Pharaoh, we can pretty much expect that, and then we have to think about other stuff too. There were obviously these rumors that Troy and Pharaoh were supposed to be joined by a third game based in Mesopotamia. I don't want that. Nobody wants that. Because this whole thing about joined up sequels shouldn't really be happening. Again, it's kind of weird. Sure, it can happen for stuff like Warhammer, or yeah, you know, for Warhammer 40k eventually when that happens. But titles should remain singular titles without having the need of sequels unless something is drastically changing. Rome 1 to Rome 2, for example. Well, Rome 2 when they fixed it. Shogun 1 to Shogun 2. Those are the perfect examples, not Troy 1, Troy 2, the sequel, and Troy 3, the Troyaning. Creative Assembly should start working on titles that, first up, are also still popular, Three Kingdoms is still popular, and also the safe ones. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel with a setting that nobody really cares about, go for settings like another medieval and so on, but that's not the topic here. It's more of the case of revive the product that's still obviously still getting a lot of love. Every time I look at Three Kingdoms, I feel really disappointed because this game had a lot of potential to be absolutely one of the greatest. There's a lot of stuff still in the game files that hinted towards a lot of future content too. It's something that they could potentially redeem themselves with, because that was the biggest shit show before Warhammer 3 came along. Maybe it's time to start redeeming themselves everywhere possible. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Let's start a bit of a discussion. I'm still a little bit ill, so I might be a bit slow with replies and so on, just to let you guys know. Yeah, it's not been great. I've been painting a lot more, though, which is nice. About 100 Night Goblins I'm trying for this week. I don't think I'm going to get it done, because sitting down is a pretty big struggle for a large amount of time. But yeah, at least I'm on the mend. See you guys soon, and have a great day.